We are at Uday's place in Monterey, and he is now going to tell us about the two beers that he's going to offer us. And we'll hear these are homemade beers and specialty of Uday.
We are going to taste two beers. Both are so-called ale as opposed to lager. These are all ale varieties, and one is Scotch ale. So nothing to do with Scotch whiskey or anything, but made in Scotland. Therefore, it's called Scotch ale. And the other one is a Belgian triple. A single, double, triple based on level of alcohol. So this will be about 8%. So it's not too high like 15 or something, but 8%. So it's slightly higher than the typical 6% beer, 6, 7 or 8 generally. So this is a Belgian triple, and this is Scotch ale. Scotch ale would be about 6.5, 7% alcohol. This is about 8% alcohol, roughly speaking. Now, I like to make beers that are not extremely bitter. So on the scale of 0 to 100, let's say IPA, India Pale Ales are like 70, 80, 90. More bitter, the young people can say, I'm macho, I can take it. Can you take it like me? And therefore the bitter beers are popular among younger people. But sensible people like us always want to have flavorful, very nice, not bitter. Of course, you have to have some bitterness to balance the sweetness, otherwise it's going to go to spare factor. So basically that's what it is. So Belgian beers are my most favorite. Then the ones from the English beers, porters and stouts and Scotch ale and so forth. I also like Hefeweizen, which is wheat beer. Hefeweizen is wheat in German beer. Then a few of those types. So essentially non-bitter, flavorful, good balance between sweetness and bitterness. That's what it is. So this is Scotch ale, and this one is Belgian triple. So those are the two beers that we're going to taste.
How much is the IBU for?
This would be about, both of them are less than 30.
Less than 30.
So when I make it, the amount of hops you add controls how much bitter it is. So essentially, as the German law has said, maybe 600 years ago, that you need 4 things to make beer: water, the grain, then yeast and hops. Only those 4 things are added, nothing else is to be added. So those are the 4 things you can make beer out of. So of course these days everything is available on the web, or you can go to shops and buy it. So I buy it on the web and make it. The first time I made it was in IIT days.
Oh, really?
So of course in those days I made beer out of moong dal. And then after coming to US, all the ingredients are easily available. So then maybe in 90s I started to making. So basically for 10 years I didn't make any more beers. Graduation from IIT, then Philippines, and then Philadelphia, so forth. After going to Dallas, I started making beer. So at least 35 years I've been making beer.
Wonderful.
And personally I think my beers are far, far better than anything you can ever buy anywhere else.
Yeah. So
anyway,
let's
we
test
should try it and taste it. You can taste it and see how it
You're
is.
going to try this now?
This is Scotch ale.
This is Scotch ale?
So this is slightly more bitter, but it's a balance, so it's not very bitter. But there's the Scotch ale.
Okay.
So
All right.
this is the Scotch ale.
Cheers.
So
Cheers.
barley, oats and wheat. Those are the 3 that I get used. So now what happens, as we all know, grains have to grow. So all the grains have natural enzymes in them, but those enzymes wake up at such and such temperature. So when you plant seeds, when the temperature grows technically about 170 degrees inside the ground, then these enzymes wake up and they convert carbohydrates into sugars automatically. Naturally they do that, and then those sugars are eaten by the plant to grow. So when the plant is growing, they use that sugar to grow. That's the technical thing. So the same thing is done in beer. You have grain that you roast, and roasted grain you put in the beer, heat it till 170 degrees, and then leave it that way. And before you put it in, of course you grind it so that it becomes easier. So 170 degrees, you wait for about half an hour. So half an hour, those is all it takes to convert carbs into sugars, as much as it can. Of course there are certain things it will not, but most of the carbs get converted into sugar. So that sugary solution is called malt. So you have a sugary solution. So now there are 3 important rules for making beer. Sanitation, sanitation, sanitation. That many people are affected by gluten. That some have allergies of gluten, so you can make gluten-free beer. Out of what? What I say, why don't you make in India, make gluten-free beer? There are many people will happily buy it. There is no trouble. Otherwise, if they drink this, which has gluten, they will have trouble. So you can make gluten-free beer. Heavier beers take longer time to mature, so you can keep them longer. Lighter beers you can drink literally the next day after you've done. So, and then you have done the beer. Now, after doing the beer, the question of carbonation. So there are two ways to do it. So before you bottle it, you add some more sugar, and that sugar gives it. This yeast is always there. Yeah. So that sugar will create the carbonation. So you add dissolved sugar and add it. Leave enough gap up in that bottle. Cap it. And now in the next week or so, the carbon dioxide will get created naturally, and that's how you get carbonated bottled beer. You buy keg, and you can have a keg, you put it in there and add carbon dioxide tank, and you add whatever carbon dioxide you need, and then you can just put it on tap.
And so you said 8 psi will do the job.
8 psi will do the trick, just the right amount of carbonation.
Yeah.
And so there is just enough foam, not too much, not too little. So that's how one can do that. And now one important precaution is that when you bottle beer, make sure you leave sufficient gap up there. Otherwise, carbon dioxide will get created. It will become a bomb and it will explode. Boom.
Yeah.
So I have done that in the past. When somehow I forgot to keep enough space in some bottles, and they exploded.
Yeah.
The whole everything just on the ceiling. You can see that. So avoid that. The whole idea in making beer is that just like you cook at home, you make the food the way you like it. You can make the beer the way you like it. You like sweeter, make it sweeter. You like more fruity, make it fruity. You like more bitter, make it bitter. Whatever. You can adjust it exactly the way you want it. Commercial beers are made to sold it to the mass market. So it general public likes it, doesn't mean you like it. So you make beer just like you cook at home, the way you like it. That's the idea. So good luck making beer.
Yeah. Let us start from the very beginning. Yeah.
Including the equipments.
Including the equipments.
So you start with a grain, which is essentially roasted grain. You start with. Now the higher the level of roasting, the darker the beer. But you roast the grain, you grind it, so it becomes slightly small, powdery, and then you get 5 gallons of water in this 10-gallon stainless steel tank. And then you add it to that, and then you can, as I mentioned, first you can raise temperature to 170. All the grains have naturally built enzymes. They will convert carbs into sugars, and then you filter out all those grains. So you don't have to do that. What you can do is you can just buy your dark malt extract. So you go to the next step. You buy the malt itself directly. So you don't need to bother with the grain and all these things. You skip one whole step. So now when you have this malt, you can, in the water, you just pour the malt and then boil it for 1 hour. In the first 5-10 minutes you add the bittering hops, and towards the last 10 minutes you add the flavoring hops, and you can buy premium hops. There are 100 different kinds of hops you can buy. Now different beers, Belgian beers, English beers, German beers, French beers, everybody has their own favorite hops. So you use those 2-3 types of hops and bittering and flavoring, and the level of bitterness you decide how much you like. So you can do that. You boil it so that it becomes completely sterilized. So you have your gas tank here. So you open the gas, start the flame, and then boil it. Count 1 hour from the beginning. After about 5-10 minutes you add the bittering. Then when 5-10 minutes are remaining, you add the flavoring. After 1 hour you stop. Completely sterile malt solution, you have that. Now you need to cool it down. It is all at 212, it's boiling. So you need to bring it down to 80 degrees or below for the yeast to do well. 70 to 80 is an excellent temperature. So you need to cool this down. So what you do is that you pick up your hot solution and put it in a ice bath. So you can have a pot like this, for example, fill it up with water, add at the pot and add ice surrounding it, so that in about 20-30 minutes it cools down, and you may need to change the ice and so forth to make it cooler. As fast the better, faster the better. You can have a I used to have a heat exchanger with a copper tube and then ice bath there, and it would circulate and cool it down faster, but it becomes too much pain. This is so easy, so I just do that. In half an hour, water is cooled, malt is cooled to 80 degrees or below. You are ready to add yeast. So you start yeast the day before, so it grows. You may have really, I'm not kidding, but maybe 2-3 tablespoons. So now you need to add it to the malted solution, which is sterilized, and it's already cooled below 80. Yeast like the same temperature that you like. So 70 to 80 is perfect temperature. More than 90 they die, more than 50 they go to sleep. So 70 to 80 is the perfect temperature. You add yeast, stir it, and now that solution we need to move it to a carboy, which is a 6-gallon carboy. This is essentially a PET type of plastic, so it's as good as a glass. Glass may be slightly better, but doesn't make too much difference. Add it here, comes up to somewhere here, and then this is a one-way valve that I have created. For example, basically, as you know, alcohol, how is it produced? Sugar is equal to alcohol plus carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide escapes through this particular tube, and there's a water here. So basically gas goes away, but nothing can enter back. So it's a one-way valve, which is very simple and so forth to manage. So it takes about 7 days to do the primary fermentation. Then you stop it, and essentially whatever that is on top, you pour it. So you leave the yeast, because when you pour it 2-3 tablespoons, by the time you are done, I'm not kidding, but it's up to here, something like an inch thick layer of yeast is created. You don't want that staying there for too long because it gives bad flavors. So therefore you lift it and slowly take another carboy and pour it down there and leave the original yeast here. So essentially that's the idea. Now the yeast is already there in the liquid, so the secondary fermentation for another week. Primary fermentation, about 90-95% of fermentation is done. The last 5-10% is done in the secondary fermentation, and then at the end of 2 weeks your beer is pretty much ready. Once it's ready, you put it into a big keg. So I typically make 5. So here, now one thing you should think about is that when you have finished your boiling and adding yeast, you check the specific gravity. So you have a hygrometer. This is your potential alcohol boiling bar, specific gravity. You check the specific gravity. Supposing the specific gravity when you start fermentation is 1.08. Water is 1, of course. 1.08. So 8% of solids are there essentially. So you know the beginning specific gravity. Then after finishing the secondary, after 2 weeks, you check the specific gravity once again, and let's say it comes out to be 1.01, and generally it should be less than 1.01, then the fermentation is complete. So difference between the first reading and the second reading is 7% here. So that is your percentage of alcohol approximately, not in a lab sense, but almost correct. So 7% alcohol you would have produced. Now while all these things are happening, you use a simple floating thermometer that you put it in your pot, and of course this pot already has a built-in thermometer, so you don't need that, but you can put it in while you're cooling. You need this to make sure that the temperature is below 80, so that you use your floating dairy thermometer for $5 kind of a thing, and just put it in there, so you know that the temperature is below 80. Then you add yeast. Once the secondary fermentation is over, your beer is ready. It may not be ready to drink, but it's ready. You can now transfer that beer into a 5-gallon keg, and you also have a carbon dioxide tank which adds gas to it. Now after a certain amount of time you can transfer, because this has to sit in the fridge, so therefore I transfer it into the 5-gallon into 2.5. So this 2.5 easy to keep in the fridge without taking up too much space. You can keep 2.5 gallon, so half size keg. So now here all that you need is a tap. So you put it on the outside, and this is on tap, so you can just open the tap and the beer comes out. So basically you put it on outside and the beer comes out. There is a pressure typically about 8 psi is a good pressure. So with that pressure the beer comes out, so your beer is always on the tap. Say now this would cost maybe $200-300 for that stainless steel pot. That's the most expensive. Maybe your tank, maybe $70-80. You can buy your kegs, $70-80 each. This carboys will cost you $30-40. All these other tubes are maybe $1-2 per foot, and then you can buy these fittings $5-6 each. So you can assemble everything. In my mind, a few $100, $600-700 is more than enough to have all the equipment you would ever need, and they last you for a lifetime. There's nothing that is going to go bad here. So that here it is. So you can make beer the way you like it. Good luck.